Doc here. So whenever I post my electric ukulele videos or any of my ukulele videos where I do some soloing, I get some questions about soloing and blues. And there aren't a lot of lessons on YouTube for ukulele blues. There's a few. 10 Thumbs has some great ones, and Rock Class 101. But other than that, it's pretty sparse. So I figured I'd do a little lesson on the blues on the ukulele. I think it's going to end up being like 4 parts, probably, just to split it up, so they're not super long. We'll talk about what the blues is and a little bit of the history and the music theory, just at a very basic level. Then we'll go into playing rhythm or chords for blues. We'll do it for both low G right here, and I'll get a high G ukulele out, and we'll do that too for anyone who wants that. And then I'll do a little video on soloing with the low G ukulele, just like some single line stuff. If that sounds cool, make sure you keep watching and check out for the other videos too. And if there's anything you want to see or want to know, just ask in the comments or shoot me a message or whatever. You're gonna have to bear with me today. I snapped a string, and so this is a new one, and I'm retuning it constantly. It's kind of driving me a little crazy. So just bear with me. Alright, so the blues. I think we all probably know what the blues is, or have an idea of what the blues is in our mind. And it's a lot of different things too at this point. It's evolved, music changes over the years. So, what is blues music, from the late 1800s when it first started, sounds pretty different than, Gary Clark Jr. ripping some blues today. But we'll just get into a small bit of the history of the blues. So the history of American music, very complicated, but essentially it's like a pyramid, like, or a triangle. There's 3 tenets of American folk musics, roots musics, whatever you want to call it, non-commercialized music, or at least originally non-commercialized. There's the English component, all the English that came over here, took a lot of their songs, folk songs, harmonies, melodies. A lot of the modes we use are similar to English music. Scotch, Irish, so that's Irish people, that's Scottish people, and then also what are referred to as the Scotch Irish or Ulster Scots, who are Scottish people that went to Ireland and then went on to America. That's the other one. And then African American or black music. Obviously, when we took black people from West Africa as slaves, we sort of ripped them from their culture. They had like remnants of it, but not necessarily what the Europeans had. So they developed their own musical culture based on on West African musical conventions, but sort of its own thing too. So that's kind of like the third part of the triangle of American music: English, Scotch, Irish, and African American. I'm not going to get all into the history of minstrelsy, but look up what the minstrel craze was. That happened in like the mid 1800s. So that was pretty bad and offensive, well, to everyone really, but especially to black people, African Americans at the time. And so they the banjo was sort of left behind, even though it started out as a uniquely African American instrument. It sort of got taken over by white people. And so that pushed African American musicians towards the guitar, and that helped develop blues, and sort of developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, around there. It's like just a folk music, another style of folk music, but it has its own musical conventions and music theory. One of the stories of like the discovery is W.C. Handy, I think, who's a composer and music publisher, was at a train station, and he heard what he said was a young man playing the strangest music he had ever heard. And I guess it was a guy playing blues guitar. Not what we would think of as blues right now, but think of like maybe Blind Lemon Jefferson or something like that, or Robert Johnson even. Probably sounded more like that, fingerstyle acoustic. But he wanted to publish that, so he was a big part of the dissemination of that. Blah, blah, blah. It goes on to influence jazz and country and folk and all of that, and then develops a backbeat and becomes rock and roll, and sort of becomes one of the most important musics in the history of music. And it's a shame that the theory is not really taught in any schools. We still teach almost exclusively Western music theory, for Western art music, or whatever you want to call it, classical music. Adam Neely has a great video on that, but I won't get into that. But basically the blues developed, and it wasn't super popular necessarily with the general public, or at least the white general public in this country. It was very popular with musicians. It influenced generations of white musicians. We just said country and folk. We're all listening to that and absorbing that and saying, hey, that's cool. And the same thing was happening in England. There was a whole generation of young British boys who heard old blues records and started skiffle bands, and then R&B groups, and then turned into rock and roll. The Beatles, the Who, the Rolling Stones, all that, Led Zeppelin, all that. So that's all because of the blues too. So yeah, that's a little bit of the history of the blues. Obviously got electrified at that point, and branched out, and so now we have all different kinds. Blues, what is blues? It is complicated because blues is it is a feeling. So a song that has nothing to do with the blues can feel bluesy because it gives you a blue feeling, but it's a genre, obviously, like we just talked about, all the blues. But it's also a music theory, blues tonality, and it's progression, the blues progression, which is what we're going to talk about. Blues, like I said, is a genre, and it has its own music theory, blues tonality, that doesn't conform to sort of Western music theory. So, in Western music theory, usually you have you explain things with Roman numerals a lot, like 1, 4, 5, or things like that. And, there's a lot of diatonic stuff. And if you have anything that's not necessarily diatonic, you explain it through mode mixture, or secondary dominance or something. If you have a D major and then a G major and then a G minor, you have some explanation for why that sounds good. And in the blues, they don't have the same rules. Minor and major tonalities are mixed together, completely. So you'd be playing a major chord and you'd be playing a minor note over it. It's pretty cool. That traces back to West Africa. They use a lot of pentatonic scales there, major, minor, suspended, all in the same situation. So it's pretty cool. So blues is tonality, and then there's the blues progression, which is what we're going to talk about. The 12-bar blues. There is a blues progression. Not every song that uses that progression is blues, and not every blues song uses that progression, but it is the most common, and it is the basic building block of the blues, and you do basically need to understand a 12-bar blues if you want to play blues. So we'll go over what that is. It's all gonna be applied to the ukulele. You can totally play blues on the ukulele. Some people will say, "Oh, you really can't," but oh yeah, you totally can. Who cares? You can play any music on anything as long as you put some effort in. So I think blues is a little bit easier on a low G ukulele. It mimics the guitar a little bit more. It's more linear. It works better for me, especially for soloing. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on more, but I'm also going to go over what to do with a high G ukulele as well, because you can do anything with that. I'm just not the expert on that. If you master the Campanella style, you could rip some pretty sick solos. The low G rhythm, we'll go over the 12-bar blues and how to play it rhythm-wise. All right?